Hello and welcome. You're watching Head to Head, and I am Oles Gerjuk. Impressive, but not unexpected. A third of all news on top Russian TV channels is dedicated to Ukraine, and more than 90% of references are negative. These are just a few theses of the survey done by the Hybrid Warfare Analytical Group of the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. It has been analyzing the media content over the past 3 years. To tell us more on this, we welcome to the studio today Ruslan Kavatsyuk, advisor to the Vice Prime Minister of Ukraine for European and Euro-Atlantic integration. Hello, and thank you for joining us today.
Hello.
So first of all, what are the main narratives of Russian propaganda right now?
Well, there are, over the last 3.5 years, we've analyzed top 3 TV channels communication of Russian Federation.
What are they?
And these are Russia 1, Channel 1, and NTV. Over the last 3.5 years, they've been communicating a lot about Ukraine, but all the negative mentionings that we've analyzed were basically covering 6 main narratives. And these are that Ukraine has a civil war in Ukraine. There's second narrative that Ukraine is a failed state. It's not a real country. Third narrative.
So they don't consider Ukraine to be a independent, separate country?
It's not a country, basically. It's a failed country. It's never become a real country. So there is no sense of respecting it as a country.
Not honored to be a country.
And basically you don't have to respect its borders. You don't have to respect its citizens. You don't have to apply international law to this country. So this is the narrative behind it.
What an imperialistic view.
Well, then the third narrative is that Russia helps Donbass, the eastern part of Ukraine, where they've started the war.
So they praise themselves for that?
Yeah, they do, and we believe that they do it for a reason, because they did not deliver their promise. They promised to take more than half of Ukraine into Russian Federation, because this is part of Russia, as they communicated back in 2014, and they didn't do it. They've basically occupied, together with Crimea, only 7% of Ukrainian territory.
Which is Donbass.
Crimea plus Donbass, yeah. And that means that they took Crimea in, they were punished, and then later, when it was there was a referendum, so-called referendum, about being part of Russia or not, they did not take Donbass in, and they have to explain it, both to their own population and also to the population of occupied territories, because people there, some of them genuinely wanted to be in Russian Federation, and they feel distressed, they feel disappointed, they feel that Russia betrayed them. So they also Russians want to lower the tension over there as well.
And what about the other narratives?
The rest 3 narratives are minor narratives, but basically they communicate the reasons why Russia behaves that way. So they say that Ukraine is a Russophobic country. They say that Ukraine is a fascist minority government, which is a nationalistic fascist government that controls Ukraine and manipulates Ukraine. And the 6th narrative is that the West manipulates Ukraine against Russia. So they try to explain both why Ukraine is succeeding with European Euro-Atlantic integration. If Ukraine does get free visa regime with EU, or Ukrainians get a free trade agreement, they have to explain to their own population why Ukraine is succeeding. And they say, well, these are cookies that West gives Ukraine. Ukraine did not deserve it, but the West is manipulating, that's why they give the cookies. When the West says something negative about Ukraine, well, they say, well, these are the second part of the story of manipulation.
So they show this connection between Ukraine and the European Union, well, basically developing connection between Ukraine and European Union as some kind of a flirt?
Not a flirt, as a manipulation. So basically the master West is manipulating puppet Ukraine against Russia. It's using Ukraine against Russia.
Okay. What is the interest of West then?
For Russians?
Yes.
Well, we understand that Kremlin is working hard to prove to their own population that Western type of democracy is not possible in post-Soviet countries.
It is just wrong. Mm-hmm.
It is wrong, it is unsuccessful, it's never going to work. And if you choose that path, as Ukraine did, you will be punished, you will never be successful, you will be manipulated, you will be used, and so on. So they're trying to undermine this whole paradigm of Westernization of post-Soviet countries. And Ukraine is the best example. If Ukraine succeeds, then Russia has nothing to provide to their own population. Why not? Why not become as successful as Europeans and Ukrainians?
Mm-hmm.
Why stay this kind of territory where you have terrible roads and medicine and education that is falling apart and so on?
Coming back to the topic that you mentioned, that the Russian government promised their population to seize half of the territory of Ukraine. How are the Russian authorities actually justifying for their own population why the Crimea was taken and Donbass was not?
Well, we believe that, well, first of all, President Putin promised that half of Ukraine is Russia, was given by Russia to Ukraine, which is a nonsense that he made up, and now he's saying it all over the place. But he's begun to say that in 2014, and I believe in April 2014 in his Valdai conference. And we understand that they've retreated from that promise as soon as they met actual fight back from Ukraine, as soon as they've had a real war, and as soon as they got scared that they will be punished for this, for the war crimes that they've committed.
They never implement the Minsk agreement. What do they say about the ceasefire, about the armed forces of Ukraine, about
Well, that's the first narrative, yeah. That's the first narrative. So they talk about all this all the time, but they say we're not involved. This is Ukrainian civil war.
Okay.
Russia is not part of it.
Do they say that so-called separatists are adhering to the Minsk Accords and the Ukrainian side is basically violating? Okay. What did they say about the hostilities in the residential areas and about the casualties?
They communicated as, they basically, in this narrative, the civil war, they're trying to undermine trust into armed forces of Ukraine as a legitimate institute of Ukraine that protects itself.
So they are reversing kind of the accurate information upside down. That's what they're doing, right?
Well, we believe so, yeah.
How can Ukraine resist this?
Well, first of all, we should not close our eyes to this problem, and we should be aware that this aggression hasn't stopped yet, and we should do our best to stop it. But we should also understand that Ukraine on our own will not be able to do it.
Okay.
So natural thing is to combine and get together, join forces with other nations that are under Russian attack.
Mm-hmm.
They have natural interest to work together with us to stop Russian aggression.
But what could be done to prevent this disinformation campaign from happening? Not even to avoid, but to prevent at all?
Well, we definitely, one of the things that we've learned is that Russian TV channels are not used as media, but as instruments of aggressive propaganda. And as they are used not as media, they should not basically be perceived as media.
How big is this part of media that is being used in this kind of
That's hard to say. We've been studying only top 3 TV channels that cover 70% of Russian population, but the perception is that all Russian media in this way or the other are controlled or in some ways influenced by Kremlin.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned that we should unite probably our efforts to combat Russian disinformation campaign with our international partners, and I know that the Hybrid Warfare Analytical Group has also presented the main narratives of Russian propaganda about Europe. Could you please comment on that?
Well, that was our previous survey that we did. We did the same methodology using marketing analysis to understand what Russian TV channels say to their own population about each European country, and it appeared that they cover in general 85% negative news about different European countries, with France being the first negatively covered country. So it's an eye-opening experience for Europeans. You would expect it about Ukrainians, but you wouldn't expect it about Germany, for example, or other European countries.
Well, and the presentations of this study were held in London, Brussels, as far as I know, Paris, Stockholm, and Tallinn. How were they commented on? How did the population react to this?
Well, we presented it within expert and government audiences, first of all, and also some media. We did have a lot of resonance with the expert in all of those countries. Some were focusing on methodology, trying to understand how we did the research. And as soon as they got the proof that the research was valid, then they were very interested in the results. We seem to have nice, from our perspective, very good outcomes, since a lot of experts never thought about looking into what Russians are saying to their own population, because their own internal population is the most important one. If they have the support of internal population, they can do whatever they want all over the world. If they don't have the support of internal population, then it's harder for them.
Yeah, but now international community is aware of this, and
getting more aware.
Yes.
Not yet. The awareness is not yet built. We should.
Well, but truth is a weapon, and lies are just a necessary shield, like Mark Lawrence said once, this American-British novelist. And since we know the truth, we can resist, I hope. But thank you so much for your interesting comments, and thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you.
That was Ruslan Kavatsyuk, advisor to the Vice Prime Minister of Ukraine for European and Euro-Atlantic integration. Thank you for watching Head to Head, and stay tuned for more with UATV.